Hi there. Happy Veterans Day. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. We're having a free live class today, a little bonus class for Veterans Day, and we're going to talk about the pronunciation of Veterans Day as well as take any questions that you have. And I just want to let you know that I'm very happy for those of you who've been attending live classes. You've asked really great questions, and it's helped me know which topics to talk about in future live classes and what videos to make to help you improve your personal and professional communication in American English. As always, I'll be pointing out some resources for you on speechmodification.com where you can find free videos and lessons to help you with American English pronunciation. And again, go ahead and ask your questions at any time. I will stop what I'm talking about to address those as well. So welcome everyone. Happy Veterans Day. Today is November 11th, and it was the end of World War I on 11/11 at 11/11 that they had armistice. So this day used to be called Armistice Day. Now it's called Veterans Day. And we take time out to honor those who have served our country on Veterans Day. And I would also like to take time out to make sure we're pronouncing Veterans Day correctly, and also to take advantage of that any word or phrase can teach you about your accent and teach you about patterns that you may have. So often when I'm creating a video, people will request, how do you pronounce this word? How do you pronounce that word? Or I'll know that certain words are challenging for non-native speakers to pronounce. And of course, certain words are also challenging for native speakers to pronounce based on the patterns that are in the word. So let's take a look at the patterns that are in this phrase, and I'm going to highlight the things to watch out for. So when I'm planning a video that I create or planning a lesson, I look through the word and think about what patterns are there. I think about similar words and other issues that might come up. And so you're getting to see a little bit of the process today when we look at the phrase Happy Veterans Day. So the first thing I want to point out is that even though the word happy is typically not too difficult to pronounce, there are a few things that can happen here. So with the letter H, for some speakers of English, they will either leave that H off, so it might sound more like appy instead of happy. And for others, they might make the H sound too noisy. They might have some constriction in the back of their throat, which makes their H, their sound more like a especially Russian speakers and some others who have that type of sound in their language might make too much noise on the H for happy. So if you have an issue with either of those things, you can check out my video to help you with the American H. But for now, just think about having an open throat and the air will continue. There's a little bit of windy noise, happy, but no constriction and no noise. The vowel in happy is vowel a. That's the same vowel as in black cat. And the most typical vowel errors for the vowel a are either to not open enough, ha. You might end up sounding more like he with a central vowel, or to have the tongue too far back, too low in the back, and it might sound more like ha rather than ha. So again, you can find many videos and help for vowel a and similar words on my website. And then lastly, I would say that in the word happy, that sometimes people have a challenge making the E vowel on words that end with Y. This is particularly true on words like city or pretty, where we have a vowel I followed by a vowel E. And in that case, I have to go from a lax vowel, I, to a tense vowel, E, city or pretty. And people have a tendency to either do two lax vowels, which sounds more like city or pretty, or two tense vowels, which sounds like cd or pretty. So you can get some extra help for the I and E vowels separately, and I recommend working on those two vowels separately and then starting to combine them in words like city and pretty. And just watch out for the ends of words that when a syllable is unstressed but it has a tense vowel like E at the end, sometimes we might be too lax on it. So watch out for not saying happy, but happy. Have that tension and that stress on the E. Speaking of stress, happy has the first syllable stressed and the second syllable is short and reduced. Lastly, there are a few people that have difficulty with P in the middle of words. They might not let a puff of air come out, happy, p. They might say it more like happy, happy, especially Indian English speakers, sometimes Arabic speakers. And you just want to make sure that you are saying your P with a burst of air, happy, happy, p. You should be able to feel the air coming out when you say that. That's a lot of details for one small word, happy, which most of you are already pronouncing correctly. But you can see how when we break down the patterns in the word, we can be aware of what things we need to watch out for. So if you're wondering if you have any of those patterns, like the tendency to not say the E or challenges with vowel A, what I suggest is take a look at speechmodification.com and check out my accent overviews. So I have some free downloads for you, and I'll show you now where you can find those, that will tell you what patterns you have in your accent based on your native language. Now, of course, everyone is individual, and many of you have corrected some of these patterns, but it's a really good starting point for understanding why your English sounds different than native speakers. It's simply because the sound system in your brain from your first language or languages influences how you hear and pronounce American English. So when you go to speechmodification.com, you can go to the store page and click on the free downloads link. You'll see that here on the side, free downloads. And there you'll find accent overviews, help for native languages for all of the different languages. And so if you speak Arabic or Russian, Chinese, Spanish, you can find your language. You can download the accent patterns, and it'll tell you these are the patterns you're likely to have. So you may have a tendency to say instead of or E instead of I, etc. They're very useful, and I highly recommend checking those out. So we've gotten through the word happy so far. Now let's take a look at the word veteran, and I'll change colors so we can see those patterns. So the word veteran, the first and most obvious pattern that you might need to watch out for in veteran is the V sound. So the letter V for Russian speakers, Indian English speakers, and several other languages has a tendency to be a little bit close to a W sound. So to make sure you're making a correct V sound, make sure your lip and teeth are together and that the sound continues and your voice is on. So it should sound like V. You should be able to hold it. If you try to say it V and you can't hold it, that means probably that you're stopping the air instead of allowing the air to continue, and it might sound closer to a V, more like something in between a W and a V. You can get help for W and V versus each other in my video about W and V. It's very useful for distinguishing those two sounds and making sure you're using a good V sound. Then the stress in veteran is on the first syllable, so I try to lengthen there. Veteran, Veterans Day. And on that stressed vowel, we have the vowel eh. And so that's the vowel that's in red tint. And the errors that I hear for this vowel are sometimes people will see the letter E and they will say an A vowel because that is how you pronounce that letter in their language. So they're not saying American A, but they have something that's kind of in between American A and the vowel. It sounds just like eh. So make sure that you're relaxed and your jaw is open, and you can try it just on the word vet or get or set, and make sure you kind of have that good relaxed vowel. Again, you can get more help for this and all of any vowel in American English on my American Vowels playlist and also on speechmodification.com. And then let's look further onto the word veteran. And what we'll hear often is that even though there can be three syllables, veteran with an sound in the middle, we have a tendency in American English to shorten and reduce this middle syllable. So it will sometimes sound, rather than veteran, more like veteran, veteran. I go right from the T to the R. So people will say Happy Veterans Day. You can also say Happy Veterans Day. That's also correct. And depending on which one I do, the T is going to have two different potential pronunciations. I had forgotten about that. I'm amazed at how many different patterns we already have, and we're barely halfway through this phrase. So you can see how there's a lot of things that are influencing how you're pronouncing words, and you probably are doing most of these things correctly. But when you know what patterns you have a tendency to make errors on or to have differences on, you're better able to correct your pronunciation because you know what it is that's wrong. I think having that information is one of the most useful things, because even if you haven't corrected all of your accent error patterns, if you're going from understanding why your pronunciation is different, then you're able to change it. If you just know something's off or that word is hard for me, that's very challenging. So another thing I'll suggest besides my using my overview of accents, my free downloads from speechmodification.com, is take advantage of one of the services I offer, which is a free screening of your speech. You can come to my website. Again, I'll show you so you have seen it once before. So when you come to speechmodification.com and you look at the top menu, so here's my store page, but if I go back here to the top, I can see that right here there's a link that says free screening. And when I click on that, it tells you exactly what to do, how to make a recording for me, send it to me on email or upload it on the website, and saying some words and phrases. I'll listen to your speech and I'll tell you specifically what you are doing differently, and also which things I would recommend working on first. So you may have a lot of different accent errors or accent patterns, but only some of them really matter for being well understood. And so if you're going to try to change your speech, improve how well you're understood, knowing what needs to change and how to prioritize for practice and learning is very useful. So again, that's on my website, speechmodification.com, and just go to the free screening. Hello, everyone. Some questions. I'll pause for a moment and take those. John Lennon says, I hear some Americans say it with an aspirated T. I've always said it like you're just say it with an aspirated T. I've always said it just like you're teaching us now. Yes, there's a variety of different ways, veteran, where we can pronounce that word. So we do a number of different things on the T sound in the middle of words. And in this case, it's a matter of whether I'm shortening and reducing or saying all of the syllables. Susan wants to know, is R a syllabic consonant? So R has the ability to be a syllabic consonant. It's not exactly the same as syllabic N and syllabic M and L, but I usually call that type of R the vowel R. So in words like paper, Veterans Day, where the could be a syllable, then yes, R does function the same way as a syllabic consonant. It can have a vowel and a consonant sound together. That's a great question. Okay, let's go back to looking at our word Veterans Day. So for that T sound, if I'm saying it as 3 syllables, I actually wouldn't say the T. So if I'm saying it as veteran, then my T is between 2 vowels and it sounds more like a D, in which case I'd say it more like veteran. A flap T there, a nice light T. We talk about flap T a lot in this class because it's one of the most American sounding patterns that you can adopt. I have a number of videos teaching you the different ways T is pronounced in the middle of words. This T is the same T called a flap T that we have in words like better, matter, Seattle, etc. Just sounds like a nice light touched D sound. So if I'm doing 3 syllables, veteran, I'm going to have the flap T. If I'm doing 2 syllables, veteran, then I'm going to use an aspirated T with a little puff of air, Veterans Day, because in words with TR, I use a t sound. I use an actual T with a puff of air. So you can choose either one, Happy Veterans Day or Happy Veterans Day, and you'll have a different T depending on which one you're using. Okay. So yes, watching out for if I'm doing veteran or veteran, I still need my American R, which is always going to be my tight back R. I want to make sure that I'm using the back of my tongue to form that R rather than the front. I don't want to roll veteran or veteran. I want my tongue back, veteran, veteran. And of course, American R doesn't really have a quick fix, but I do have a full playlist teaching you how to shape and correctly pronounce your American R sound. So you can check that out. And then lastly, at the end of this word, we have somewhat of a syllabic end, Veterans Day. I don't really use much of a vowel there. The vowel that I do have is vowel schwa, sounds like but I merge that right with the end. So veteran, veteran. It's almost like I'm just going right from the R to the end, veteran. And then another pattern to watch out for here is that when I'm saying Happy Veterans Day, I'm using the possessive. So it's the day for veterans, which means Veterans Day. I need my apostrophe there to show that it's a possessive. And as is the case for many times when we add the letter S for plurals, verb forms, possessives, that's actually a Z sound. So I have to make sure that my voice stays on from the end, Veterans Day. And one way that I can do that is by linking to the next word, day, Veterans Day. It's easier to keep my voice on when I run those words together, when I link them. Okay, and then lastly, let's look at the word day. Most people, fortunately, don't have too much of an issue with the D sound at the beginnings of words. But on the vowel A, you might again have a tendency to make the error of just using one vowel sound. In your language, in your native language, it's highly likely that your A is just an A. But in American English, A is two sounds, which we can see a little bit more easily here in the word day because we spell it with two letters. But in other words like name or stay, when we just have the one letter, it's still two sounds. We glide from the E into a more lax, closed I vowel. You don't really have to think about those two vowel sounds. If you want to perfect it, you may go through and learn about vowel A in my video about the vowel A. But for most people, just thinking about holding your A longer gets you that American sound. So rather than Happy Veterans Day, make sure you're lengthening the vowel in day. Happy Veterans Day, day. And you'll naturally kind of close and change the vowel as you finish the word. Happy Veterans Day. So I'm not sure I even told you about every single possible accent pattern in this phrase, but you can see that even a short, simple phrase that you might have been saying today has many, many aspects to it, many, many patterns to be aware of and work on. So let's put it all together. I'm going to erase this mess and we'll talk about a way to shape and highlight a correct pronunciation of this. And while I'm erasing, I'm going to read the questions. We have another question from a viewer, which is a question about the oi diphthong. Is it okay if I pronounce it as oi instead of oi? I use the same O as an or. Okay, so your question is, we often spell this as oi, like in boy. And she's wanting to know if she can pronounce it like with an O and an I rather than an aw and an I. And I would say that I pretty much pronounce it this way as well. So the difference between the O and the aw is really how open my jaw is. And I'm definitely not saying boy, with an aw, with a clear aw vowel. I'm saying boy, oi, O. So the first vowel I make is pretty much an O. I think this is a matter of different linguists are going to write this diphthong different ways. I do follow this convention in my writing where I write it as an aw, I, and that probably just has to do with the mechanics. And if you slow down actual speech and you play the formant frequencies, you'll see that maybe it's more of an aw than an I. But as long as you're saying a rounded back vowel to a high front lax vowel, oi, boy, I don't think anyone will hear any difference between these two. So if this is challenging for you, as it is for me, simply think about that diphthong instead for the word boy. Great question. Susan would like to know, is it a big mistake if I pronounce the S instead of Z in English endings? It's not a big mistake. I will say the most important thing is if you're saying something like Veterans Day, is to make sure that you're doing either an S or a Z. It is a big mistake if that S or Z just drops off entirely, because then it will sound like Veteran Day. Will make it sound like you're missing the grammatical marker. But if I say Veterans Day instead of Veterans Day, people are not necessarily going to hear that difference. Where it comes up is when I'm linking to the next word, I need to make sure that I use the voiced Z sound. For example, if I'm saying the plural, misspelling veterans, if I'm saying the plural, veterans or veterans are great. Here is where I definitely need to have the Z because I'm going to be linking to R. If I say veterans are great, it sounds noticeable. It sounds like an error. If I say veterans are, that's where my voicing needs to be there so that it's not noticeable as an error. Fortunately, for most people, when they do the linking, they tend to use more of a Z sound. The difference between S and Z is really about when my voice comes on. My voice doesn't come on at all for the S, and my voice can come on at different voice onset times for the Z. And so practicing with linking, like was it and does it, to help you make sure that you use a Z when you link is pretty much all you need. If you end up saying something like veterans and it turns into a little bit more of an S and you're not saying another word afterwards, as long as that S sound is there, that's good enough. Most Americans are not going to say veterans and exaggerate the Z or lengthen on that voice sound. Consonant devoicing at the ends of words is pretty typical for Americans too, except that we certainly use the voice sound when we link. So that's a great question, and thank you for pointing that out, Susan. Okay, so lastly, let's wrap it up, and we'll just look at, again, our phrase, Happy Veterans Day. Veterans Day. And so as many of you know, I like to rewrite the words in a way that my brain will pay attention and notice and correct the sounds. So a lot of times I will use the IPA symbols because they're one sound for one symbol, but other times I'll use a spelling that I associate with those sounds, and you can choose a way of doing it that's helpful for you. I use a mix in my lessons and videos. For Happy Veterans Day, what I'm going to think about is that my main stress in this phrase is on the word veterans, and it's on the first syllable. I have a secondary stress on the first syllable of happy, so I'll put a short line there. So it'll be Happy Veterans Day. And for intonation, I'm probably going to try to use some pitch here to actually make it a happy and friendly greeting. So I'll start at a medium pitch, Happy Veterans Day, and I'll rise up on Veterans Day, and I'll fall off because it's a statement. So I don't want to rise up. I don't want it to sound like a question. Happy Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day. Now, if I was saying, did you have a good Veterans Day? Then I would rise up in pitch to show that I'm asking that question. But as a statement, I want to fall off. And then in terms of the pronunciation, my main highlights and my main concerns here are probably going to be whichever patterns I have in my native language. So maybe it's the V, maybe it's the vowels, maybe it's that R, maybe it's my E at the end of happy. So thinking about it as Happy Veterans Day, and thinking about that length there is going to be most helpful for me. Happy Veterans Day. Okay, so happy Veterans Day, everyone. I'm glad you were able to come to this little bonus class. I see there's a couple more questions, so I'll be happy to answer those before we sign off. And we will have class again on Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, our usual time. And we'll be talking about pitch and intonation. So we'll be looking at rising and falling pitch, some simple ways to practice, and kind of to how to become aware of what I was showing you here with how pitch can influence the message that I'm sending, how using a little bit of pitch variation can be helpful for hearing my meaning and hearing my intention. So I hope you can be there for that class. Susan wants to know the difference between ah and o. So those are both rounded vowels, but in the vowel quadrangle, where these are my high front vowels like E and my back vowels like ah, I have O and ah, and O is a little more closed, O, and ah is closer to that open ah. So my jaw is more open for the ah. So in words like law or caught, I have to open the jaw more and maintain the lip rounding, versus the O is a mid vowel, so my jaw is more closed and I still have that lip rounding. Ah, O. That's the main difference. The other difference is that in American English, we say O. So we have, again, a diphthong. We go O and we rise up to close, versus ah, we just can stay open with that open jaw. And then lastly, I'll just mention it because these two tend to be very challenging for people as well. The ah is the all the way open back vowel with no lip rounding. So that's a word like hot, that's a word like law, and that's a word like no, if I add that, because of course, no is just like day. I want to make sure I hold that O long enough and close and relax slightly as I'm finishing the vowel sound. Great. Oh, so good question, and thank you for asking that. You can find more details on all of the vowels. I have individual videos for each vowel sound. I also have a lot of lessons for vowels on speechmodification.com. So if you're looking for particular information, you can use the search tools on the channel page, and also you can go to speechmodification.com, and you can use the search tools on the website here as well. So if you start off in the free practice, you'll see that there comes up a search box. And so if I just type in, for example, vowels, I'll see all of the lessons and videos that correspond to my question and my topic. And I can scroll through and see what might be a good one for me. So if I'm looking for how to spell, how to pronounce the letter A, general information about vowels, interactive chart, I can find all of that here. So for example, here's my vowel A that we were talking about in day, and I can see the pronunciation, different spellings and different words, as well as links to videos and more information. So you can check those out. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I recommend doing that because you'll be notified when I go live and when I have uploading new videos. You can click on the notifications bell and decide what level of notification that you'd like. But I do also have a community page on my channel where I will post polls, quizzes, and you can leave feedback and make requests, ask for information, be part of the community here at speechmodification.com. You can also always leave comments and questions on any video. I will get back to you with the answers to the questions and direct you to where you can find more resources for your particular needs. So thank you so much for all of the great comments and questions today and in the past on videos. I hope to see you again on Friday at 12 o'clock, where we'll be talking about pitch and American intonation. And also just on the channel page, come check out the community page and leave me your comments and questions, and I'll know what topics to cover in future classes. So thank you so much for being a part of class today. Happy Veterans Day, or Happy Veterans Day, whichever pronunciation you prefer. I'll see you again on Friday. I'm Christine from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound American, you can do it. speechmodification.com.